Hi, this is my review of The Swarm, an expansion for the Era survival role-playing game. If you haven't seen my review of Era Survival, I'm going to put a few links in the description below so you can check out this awesome post-apocalypse role-playing game. The Swarm is an expansion that focuses completely on one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous faction besides the infected, which is the Swarm, a group with an obsession that everything needs to be burned down in order for humanity to survive. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. The quality is good. The book has great organization, everything is well written. I only spotted like a couple of, I guess you could say, errors, because it's basically a lack of space between two words and the use of infection when it should have been injection. But despite that, everything is very easy to understand. It's quite easy for you to get into the background of the Swarm and to use the materials in your campaign, that is the stories, but also anything related to the rules, to the creation of characters that come from the Swarm, or creating even enemies or non-player characters that belong to this particular faction. A couple of other criticisms is that the resolution is somewhat low in some of the, for example, in the character sheet, but that will be fixed in the future. And there are no bookmarks, but bookmarks are being added to the different PDFs from Shade of Vengeance, that is Era the Consortium, Era Survival, and you have a table of contents with hyperlinks, so it's going to be quite easy for you to move around the document despite that. And the illustrations are quite awesome. So overall, it's good quality despite that. Now let's talk about the contents. You get information about the origins of the Swarm. The beginnings of the Swarm was quite philosophical at first. You had this group of people that were quite scared about their own survival because of the infection. So they had this leader, Stephen Costas. They were led to the far north of the land of Gaia. They were trying to build a new society. Many people died during this initial trip. However, they managed to find this complex, this underground complex of bunkers. It's basically like a mega vault. So you could say that they were vault hunters at first. And it was thanks to this discovery that they managed to find some refuge and protect themselves from the infection and the violence between the factions that was going on in the southernmost areas. However, Stephen Costas eventually died, and his successor was his teenage daughter. However, because the Swarm had been, I guess you could say, sheltered or isolated from the rest of the world, they had somewhat of a twisted take on things. This teenage girl basically decided to burn the entire planet in order to save it. That is, she is going to burn animals, humans, installations, technology, science, anything, any sort of lore or research or objects or people that belong to the old order of things. She wants to burn it all. And she started to organize the Swarm in a sort of like cult where people are brainwashed into becoming different sort of castes. You basically have the drones that are somewhat mindless, and the rest are considered specials. The specials have, as the name would imply, specialized roles within the Swarm. Some of them have to do with brainwashing the drones, or they would say re-educating them. Some others have to do with taking decisions, some others have to do with their own research and technology, because despite the Swarm destroying everything that they consider outside of the Swarm, they also have their own ways to rebuild the planet in their own vision. You're going to get information about all of these different castes or the hierarchical structure within the Swarm. Let's talk a bit about the drones. The drones are basically mindless slaves. They have been subjected to a certain, I guess you could say, psychiatrical treatment. The process is quite mysterious. They do not tell you exactly what substances they use or the more finer or precise points in the re-education system. But they are completely stripped from their identities, from any sort of judgment that they could have, any sort of critical thinking ability, and their heads are completely shaped to further erase individuality. So the drones basically become sort of like automatas. They have no minds of their own. They can perform simple tasks. They have certain intelligence when it comes to manipulating weapons and carrying out operations, some strategies and tactics, but they are there to be almost cannon fodder. They can also serve as servants in other more peaceful tasks. So for example, if they need to do some labors in different camps outside of war operations, they can do that, but for the most part they are there to be used. There is also, I guess you could say, a subcategory within the drones, which is the escapee. Sometimes some individuals break away from this mind control and they manage to escape from the swarm. However, life is not very good for the escapees because they know too much. Even though the indoctrination process erases most of their memories, they still could have some information as to the process that some of the specials known as the abecedaries use to mind control the drones. So the escapees are usually hunted down by the other members of the swarm, and they are not usually trusted by other factions because most of the other factions, in fact I think all of the other factions, are at war with the swarm. Then we have the first type of special, which is the abecedary. Some could say that these types of specials within the swarm are the most dangerous and terrifying. They are the programmers of the swarm. However, they do not program machines, or rather they program human machines. Through their great knowledge of human psychology and many other processes that they keep under wraps, the abecedary is able to take a normal person and convert that person into a mindless follower of the swarm. When the swarm conquers a territory, usually through the use of flamethrowers and explosives, they give those that they capture a choice. They either serve the swarm or they serve the swarm. It could be a voluntary offering of yourself to the swarm, or they take you and they make you into some sort of mindless soldier. Those that prove to be too strong of mind and body to be programmed by the abecedaries usually end up dead. So the abecedaries are quite scary, and this is accentuated by their use of white masks. They look quite deadly, quite ghostly. Then you have the administrators. The administrators do very little field work. In fact, most of them remain in their offices most of their lives. They are the ones taking decisions about the resources, about the different projects. They have this middle management position within the swarm. They technically outrank other members of the swarm, but they still need to listen to the alpha, which is a higher hierarchy. The administrators take decisions that have to do with overall plans and the burning or scorched earth process or plan that the swarm is carrying out. They want things to flow smoothly, and because of this, they enjoy greater comfort and safety. Most of the time, they do not have to see action, they do not have to kill or protect themselves. However, the position does allow for a lot of political conflict within it. There are constantly other members of the administrators that want to get the upper hand over their colleagues, even though the swarm should act as a single organism. Because the administrators, like the abecedaries for example, they have a greater degree of self-awareness, or their own way to judge things, be aware of things, they are also looking out for number one, or for their own interests. Some of the other members of the swarm could actually resent them because of the commodities and some privileges that they enjoy when compared to the other more unfortunate members. Then we have the agents. The agents are quite mysterious. They are spies and saboteurs and the adventurers. Even though drones are the shock troops that they send forward in wartime operations, the agents could even infiltrate other factions and societies in Gaia. They are barely recognizable as members of the swarm. They are not usually wearing white masks like the Abyssidary, or unless they want to pretend to be Abyssidary. They do not have shaven heads. They do not dress as sophisticated as administrators. They can adapt to any sort of role. Some say that the true mission of the agents is a complete mystery, and some others say that the agents serve the leader of the swarm, the highest part of the swarm, which would be the Aleph. So agents are there to prepare societies to be converted or taken by the swarm. The agents specialize in weakening societies and identifying vulnerable areas where the swarm can attack. So the agent prepares the field for the scorched earth advancement of the swarm to incinerate a particular society a bit more easy. And then we have the artificers. These are all about research and development within the swarm. There are some surprising and enigmatic things about them, because outside of the White Cross, almost no one knows how to produce injection, which is the only safe means to save yourself from infection, from the parasites. But the artificers can actually create this sort of like swarm-specific injection to protect their own members. They also develop weapons, communication devices, protective gear. Usually the artificers are the lower tiers of the hierarchy in the swarm. Sometimes they have a rivalry with the Ashen in this regard, but they are just above the drones. They are not at the height of the Abyssidary or the administrators, and because of this, some artificers strive quite a bit to gain new technologies, to take advantage of those few places that the swarm decides not to burn. Because even though the swarm has a scorched earth type of policy where everything that was before in civilization should be destroyed, they're still quite flexible in keeping things that are for the advantage of the swarm and their preferred method of attack, which is the use of flamethrowers and explosives and such. Then we have the Ashen. The Ashen are more specialized members when it comes to fighting. They lead squads of drones. They know their strategies, their tactics. It is not uncommon for members of other factions to become Ashen when they get absorbed into the swarm. So it would be a deadly mistake to confuse an Ashen with a drone. The Ashen, because they have more individuality, more ways to find solutions to different problems, they are really good at destroying others through strategic and tactical methods rather than just brute force or very simple-minded tasks like the drones would proceed. Some members of the Ashen ranks could be the most lethal killers in Gaia. And then we have the Alphas. Each of these different hierarchies that I mentioned within the swarm has an Alpha. This is a sort of ruler / representative in a council of Alphas. The Alphas are very private. They keep to themselves. They do not reveal much of their own headquarters, their hideouts. They just meet with the other Alphas and try to discuss about the long-term plans of the swarm. This is done for security reasons, because what if there is a traitor within the swarm and wants to eliminate all of the Alphas? By keeping the Alpha's personal information in check or away from prying eyes, they will not be able to be taken at the same time, that is killed or neutralized in some way. And within the Alpha Council, one Alpha has a bit more hierarchy above them all, which is the Alpha Abyssidary. Because Abyssidarians are normally the educators, you could consider the Alpha Abyssidary to be a sort of educator or leader of the Alphas. However, there is still one above the alphas, and I know you already know who that person is. That is the daughter of Stefan Costas. She is effectively known as the Aleph. She has been leading the Swarm. Her long-term plans for the Swarm are in complete obscurity, and some in the alphas would say that she is constantly risking the entire operation by going outside. She enjoys quite a bit of disguising herself as a member of Gaia, that is of any other faction, as a normal human being, while she is the leader of the entire Swarm. It is quite common for her to act as one of her agents. She goes in different places, into different cities and camps, and pretends to be perhaps an escapee or someone outside of the Swarm, and gains vital information about the other factions, more data on their weaknesses, on their strategies and tactics, and takes all of that information and factors it into her plan for the advancement of the Swarm. So, Stephen Costas' daughter, Nicole Costas, you could say she is both the brain and the heart of the Swarm, but some people say that she is probably mentoring a successor in case something happens to her. Then we have information on the different territories of the Swarm. You have the Scorched Earth Zone, which is basically everything that the Swarm has been burning. Everything within the Scorched Earth Zone belongs to the Swarm in one way or the other. That is, if you are found in the Scorched Earth Zone, you are in grave danger. You are either a target for indoctrination, or they are probably searching for you to kill you. So it's a very dangerous area. And in all of these territories you have the general information, the history, population, and anything related to law and crimes. Then you have the City of Light. This is the original mega bunker, mega vault that was found by the first founding members of the Swarm when they went up north. This is a huge city and most of it has been unexplored. If you wanted to play a campaign focused on the Swarm, you could basically have a team of explorers searching the mysteries of the City of Light. I think you can come up with some really cool ideas. Maybe there is some strange hidden technology within the City of Light, or maybe there is a great threat. What if there is some sort of monstrous being within, some product of the parasites that is just waiting below the City of Light, waiting to strike. Then you have information on Camp Fortitude. The Swarm has few camps. Most of the time it's burning everything to the ground, but they do need to establish some bases as they move southwards for indoctrination purposes, for planning and strategies, and it seems Camp Fortitude has been erected to stay. Here people are given a level of conditioning according to the roles within the Swarm, and this is also a place of assessment to see if the members of the Swarm are still loyal to the faction. Then you also have Camp Resolution. This is a newer camp when compared to Camp Fortitude, and surprisingly it contains more structures than usual. As you have learned from the background of the Swarm, they usually burn everything to the ground. But here there are some structures that are suspiciously well kept and maintained, and this is because they have a lot of oil rigs. So as you can see, the Swarm is quite flexible in its ideals. They want to destroy everything, but if it contains oil, they want to keep it because it helps them to create their characteristic flamethrowers and explosives. Then we have a few short stories that are very useful to recreate or represent the threat of the Swarm within your own campaigns. Most of these stories have to do with conflicts against, for example, the drones. You get to see the psychology of the members of the Swarm and how, for example, an escapee suffers great fear and anguish as they're trying to make their way outside of the Swarm. You can also see the fate of those that are recaptured by abecedaries. You also have information on the different methods the Swarm uses, their weapon tests, how they perform some questionable experiments on the drones. Anything that you need to represent the threat that the Swarm portrays is expressed in these short stories. You even have some more focused stories featuring on, for example, the Ashen and other castes within the Swarm. And this is great. This is a great tool for you to build some interesting stories and know that there is still coherence or cohesion with the overall theme and background story of era survival. When it comes to rules or mechanic related information, you have background information to create ABCDaries, administrators, agents, artificers, basically anyone within the swarm. Usually drones are not very fun to play as. They are mostly to be used as antagonists or non-player characters because they have no minds of their own. However, it's going to be quite interesting to, for example, play as a drone that is trying to escape the swarm. So you have information on the appearance of the different members of the swarm, their quirks and hobbies. Maybe one of them is slavishly loyal. Maybe one of them has been reluctantly accepted. You also have information on specialties, that is the different training that the administrators and the agents and the artificers go through. Then you have information on weapons and equipment that the swarm could use, like the swarm sidearm, the shotgun, the assault rifle and flamethrower, of course. There's also information on knockout gas grenades. Of course, if you're a member of the swarm, you're going to be capturing individuals for re-education. You also have the swarm armor, different types of communication devices. You also have some tips and some really handy ways on how to represent squad combat. Era Survival has introduced a streamlined or smooth way to handle large-scale type of battles. So with the rules contained here in the swarm, it's quite easy for you to have, for example, different players with each their own combat squad of drones fighting a particular battle. This is going to be really useful. Maybe one of your players wants to play as an Ashen, maybe another player wants to play as an Abecedary, another one as an Artificer, which are probably three of the most active roles within the swarm or hierarchy. And you could have a battle with each of these players leading a small squad attacking different positions. So I think it's going to be really fun. You have all the details on how to enter combat as squad members, what happens when the leader remains with the squad, how to handle grappling situations, brawling. You also have general advice on how to handle different castes, how the other members of other factions regard the swarm as a whole, or individually even. You even have information on what each member of the swarm finds horrifying because they have been manipulated psychologically. Their fears could be somewhat different from a normal human. And near the end of the book, you have sessions and campaign frameworks. It's quite easy for you to take all of these different plot points or plot lines and structure an entire campaign around them. One thing that I really like of these different campaign frameworks that have been seen throughout the entire Era Survival books and even other products of Shades of Vengeance is that you just get the important points, the linked events, what happens when the player characters do this or that, or if they decide not to act in a way that is expected. It's quite easy to keep the campaign flowing, handling all of the branching paths, because they are going to be your own branching paths. You do not feel tied to a particular scenario or road within these campaign frameworks. So for example, in the sessions, you perhaps are a member of the swarm and Camp Resolution is experiencing a problem and you need to solve it. Maybe you are an administrator in the City of Lights, or maybe you have been captured by the swarm. You even have a campaign where you are an escapee of the swarm. That's going to be really exciting in my opinion. You also have a campaign focused on the role of the swarm scouts while they are preparing the way for the next swarm advance. And if you want to play as an agent for the swarm, you have a campaign focused on that. But it's also interesting, I think you could take all of these campaigns. If you want to use the swarm as an antagonist, you could take each of these campaigns that have the swarm as the player characters and turn it around so that it's focused on the swarm as antagonist. It's all up to you. You also have a campaign where there is something strange going on with the drones. Something that may mean that the greatest strength of the swarm could be potentially its greatest weakness. So what do I think of this expansion for Era Survival? The Swarm. This is an excellent expansion, and I think there are a few players that will consider this, or rather game masters, a must-have. If you are planning to use the Swarm as either the main antagonists or the protagonists, then you need to get this book. There's just too many good things within it to take advantage of. But I also consider it a good option if you want some more ideas on how squad combat works, because even if you are not members of the Swarm, maybe you have a squad of defenders or from the Sisterhood, you could benefit from the squad rules here. I also forgot to mention that in the campaign frameworks, you can also see the clashes between the Swarm and other factions, so that's also quite interesting. So I lean more towards saying that this is a must-have, in fact. Only if you really do not like the Swarm and you want to keep it sort of like a really loose background element, then you won't need this book, but there are so many ways in which you can benefit from this expansion. The Swarm is really a great threat, an excellent threat in fact, to make it jump out of nowhere during unrelated campaigns, because you have information on how the other factions interact with the Swarm. There's also useful information in that regard. I think that you will also enjoy this book if you have enjoyed the fiction in Era Survival. The short stories are along the same lines. They give you more information about the world, on the problems, the horror of Era Survival, how the different characters try to survive in this ghastly version of a possible future in which humanity is at the brink of disappearance or collapse. So I definitely recommend that you get the Swarm expansion for Era Survival. I personally consider it a must-have. Only those that are going to push the Swarm away from their storylines should avoid it, but the rest of the players definitely should get the Swarm. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.